Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Doing well,
Good,
thank you.
good.
We will pursue our goal, and that is spreading out information and search for the truth.
Yes, always.
And, one of the first things you have to do when you're searching for truth is use some common sense on where you go looking. So if we go to our government, in general, generally speaking, not everybody in government or in the Congress can't give you some truth, but for the most part, that isn't where you're going to find a lot of truth. And you can't go to the internet and expect that you're going to get a clear message there, because you're going to see good stuff and bad stuff, and you're going to see people condemned and fired and kicked off and canceled and all these things. So as it has always been, searching for the truth requires a little bit of an incentive to really look for it and study it, which to me means that you have to have a little bit of cooperation with anybody who's thinking along these lines without just arguing and fighting or closing people out. But those are old rules, but I think those are the kind of things that we'd like to follow. But just recently with this Omicron virus came out, I would say there was a pretty serious hysterical reaction to the market, to the stock market, as well as this whole incident. People really, just went out of their minds, scared people, and more lockups and everything else. And it was going to be so severe. But now we reported and talked on it and tried to say, take it easy a little bit. But the next day, within probably 48 hours, all of a sudden you have the stories, even the establishment of those individuals who really pump up the hysteria are saying, maybe it's not so bad. So it must not be so bad if the conventional media is now softening their stand. And I want to start off with this first article. Sigh of relief in South Africa as Omicron variant appears to be super mild. That's good news. And so the dust is settled and they overreacted, and maybe we'll embark now, and they will change their minds, and we will embark on a more sensible course dealing with COVID. The other thing is they also found out when they started looking at that is with this mild mutation that they have, the statistics on COVID deaths didn't jump up, if it had been bad when they add up all the deaths together. But they never proved a whole lot by having that measurement. Even during the middle of the epidemic, there were deaths and they were increased, but did they sort it all out? Where exactly did the deaths come from and all? But right now, they're saying, well, it can't be much, even though they have only had 2 days to test it. But I think it goes along with the fact that people have had to back off, because I think they were getting to look a little bit silly, because it meant lockdown, masks and all these kind of things, more vaccines, and the people were reacting negatively, although there were those in the establishment that said, you're going to kill everybody if you don't go along with what Dr. Fauci tells us to do. So I think there's a little shifting of gears, and we want to put a perspective on it now. Yes, there was a lot of hysteria. There's still some, and now we're getting evidence they shouldn't have been hysterical, but there's still some people who aren't giving up.
Yeah.
In spite of it all, they didn't just say, well, let's tone it down a little bit. Maybe the rules have changed. There's still some people, they just buckled on and say, we have to be more firm on making sure that we never give up on these vaccine passports.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's put up that first clip, and here's what we're talking about. This is an article from City AM. We have that first clip. Here it is. Sigh of relief in South Africa, as Dr. Paul said, as Omicron variant appears to be super mild mutation with COVID death rate not jumping. And then the next link is a quote from that article, if we can put that up. There's a quote I'd want to read out, a couple quotes. The WHO and coronavirus experts are increasingly convinced the new Omicron variant is super mild and has so far not led to a jump in COVID death rates anywhere in southern Africa. And the WHO, of course, they're the experts, you can't contradict them. They say they're calling this morning for countries to drop travel restrictions and end the mass hysteria, and instead be cautiously optimistic, as more and more reports out of South Africa suggest new Omicron is not more lethal than the Delta variant. And even Dr. Francis Collins, who we made fun of last week, I think it was, for being really super kooky, he's the director of the National Institutes of Health. He concurs with this too, though. He says, I do think it's more contagious when you look at how rapidly it spread through multiple districts in South Africa, although he emphasized there's no data that it causes more illness than the previous versions of this virus. And here's the part, again in this article, we keep seeing it over and over, this idea that Omicron could kill off Delta. And it says, looking at the first data coming out of Southern Africa, virologist Mark von Roonst said this weekend, quote, if the Omicron variant is less pathogenic but with greater infectivity, allowing Omicron to replace Delta, this would be very positive. In fact, you know this certainly better than I do, but if this weaker guy takes over the tougher guy and everyone gets the weaker one, then basically, COVID is gone. So the question is, if this is the case, why are countries doing everything they can to prevent a weaker form from supplanting the more lethal form?
I think we don't have an agreement on what science is really about between the politicians and some true experts in this field. I have a sort of a personal theory on this that says that they're giving a lot of vaccines, and if they don't work, you just give more vaccine. Yeah. And they're talking about having boosters all along. I don't think there's ever been a disease where so many injections have been given, and the more they do it, the more confused they get. So I think there's a time when the vaccines are actually altering the virus enough that the body is thinking that they're dealing with an infection. And they can do that because what gets in our body is trained to react to it. So yes, it's trying to react to to a virus, and it'll do it a certain way. But if you change the virus all the time, it's a real work and a job for the body to adjust every time. How am I going to do this? Then they're attacking the treatment, and that's why I think they get these mixed up statistics that don't show any pattern other than the fact that things aren't working well. And a lot of people are aware of the fact that this virus was not fully tested and fully approved. And I think the telltale story about that, and one of the things that has to be done if they ever want to have a better system, is they cannot exempt a pharmaceutical company from liability, because that is rejecting and dismissing one of the principles of the free market, that what you do contracts, you live up to your promises, and you have to be held to your responsibility to not hurt people. So if they can get liability protection from the taxpayers, what does it do? And then they get the money for the drug, for the vaccines. I wonder if that'll encourage subsidize something. You get more of it, you get more chances taken, and more virus and more vaccine. I wonder how many dollars have already been spent. I mean, there's 6 or 7 companies that are doing this, and they say it's for free. Don't worry about it. It's all for free. Yeah, sure. It causes a few deficits. A few deficits cause printed money, and the printed money, who has to pay for it? The people that are thinking they're getting it for free. Yeah. But when they go to the store and realize they're paying twice as much for a loaf of bread, and they'll say, "Oh, maybe that's right. Maybe that's the tax that we're paying to have all this good medical care passed out by Dr. Fauci."
Yeah, exactly. Well, the interesting thing that we want to talk about next really is this whole idea about even though they're saying this is more mild, and it's which is good news. We like good news. They're still saying you've got to go get your shots. You've got to do it or else. Interestingly enough, the first 2 cases that were identified with the Omicron variant in Africa were fully vaccinated. And that's why probably on your last point, the Moderna CEO is saying, no, our vax is no good. We've got to make a new one. It won't work.
Yeah.
But we want to talk about this, this next topic. which is a study from The Lancet. So this isn't us talking. This is a serious medical journal until they screwed up last year, but that's a whole different story. Put up the next clip because the headline is very important. The epidemiological relevance of COVID-19 vaccinated population is increasing. And that's using a fancy term to say that more people who are vaccinated are getting and passing on the virus. And go next, and here's a quote from an article about this study, because this is in language that's a little too fancy for our show, Dr. Paul. Examining new infections in Germany, researchers found that the rate of cases among fully vaccinated individuals aged 60 and older has risen from 16.9% in July to 58.9% in October. So so-called breakthrough cases now are the majority. In the space of 3 weeks in Britain, 100 COVID cases were reported among individuals who are 60 or older. Out of those infections, 89.7% of people were fully vaccinated, while 3.4% were unvaccinated. Massive majority of the population who were infected with COVID are vaccinated. How can they keep talking about very rare breakthrough cases of vaxxed people? So the whole rationale for pushing these, obviously, as even The Lancet shows, is really literally falling apart before our eyes.
That's right, and you would think the conclusion would be relax.
Yeah.
Just relax a
If
little
you want
bit.
it, take it. What's up to you?
Yeah. And this whole thing is the non-crisis is over. Essentially, it looks like it's not going to be, an epidemic a lot worse than what we've ever had. It's going to go away. But some of the people are wising up. The markets and the patients frequently, are now sensing that this is not going to be, a very, very bad situation. But at the same time, we have these people that say, you better not give up too soon because we have to protect you because we don't know yet. They'll come up with another excuse not to stop all these things. But as time goes on, it's going to be harder and harder to reimpose these mandates. And that's where the resistance is coming. And that's where we're getting a couple court rulings in our favor and saying, look, stand back. But here you would think they'd back off a little bit, but we have this tug of war going on, and we'd like to help those people that would like to make up their own minds rather than the government, help them be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, overreaction to a thankfully mild variant, put up this next clip because Germany's in the news this morning. Merkel promised they would never lock down again. And of course she lied because she's Merkel and a politician. Germany announces de facto COVID lockdown for the unvaccinated. If you don't have the shot, you literally can't do anything in Germany. I like Dr. Eli David's comment on this. He said, a crazy idea that started in Austria is quickly adopted in Germany. Because we know that Austria locked down everyone last week. So even though these cases are mild, and even though Germany is absolutely vaccinated already, they're still locking him down. They want to find a scapegoat. They've done that before, right? They want to find a scapegoat, someone to blame. Let's look at the next case because this is also Dr. Eli David, and this is a great chart. Thanks to its draconian COVID passport and the strictest mask mandate in the world, Germany has finally flattened the curve, ... but along the wrong axis. And you can see that COVID cases in Germany, since all of these draconian measures were put in place, have skyrocketed. The measures they have taken have done nothing to slow the spread of the virus in Germany. You think maybe they'd say, maybe we should try something different. No, full lockdown.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this and always trying to figure out why? And I think most people wonder, why did they do this? Why do they resist? Why are they not using a little bit of common sense? And there's probably a bunch of reasons. But one thing is they do invest a lot of time and energy, and some are innocently going along because they think, well, that guy's he's smart, he's been around a long time, I gotta go along with it. Others are concerned about losing their jobs and being punished for this. Sometimes there's a monetary thing going on. But then there's also some that I'm convinced who are designed right now in all that we're doing economically and socially, and what's going on in our streets and the riots in the street is chaos is their goal.
Yeah.
You know that most people say, oh, that wouldn't be the case, but more and more people think that is the case. But that actually provides an answer on why they do some of these things and why it seems so inconsistent. You know, there's a danger. Oh, it's not so bad, but we got to still go after the danger, and because what they want is to confuse the people, and they want more chaos, and they figure on the end, the breakdown of society, whether it's economic or medical or whatever, is their goal, because they will always come in. Authoritarians, have the answers, and so therefore they have to prove to everybody that this thing is so bad. Now you'll have to depend on us totally. But our goal, of course, is that people wake up and become less dependent on the authoritarians, no matter what their promises are, because their promises are always going to be grandiose. And that's the way it's worked for all time, that the people who are inclined for dictatorship are inclined to make rash promises. And unfortunately, it usually takes too many years for people to wake up.
Yeah.
But I think the people are starting to wake up over COVID and all this nonsense. And this one moved quickly, this episode.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Well, if anything, if Omicron is less lethal, it's like a mild cold, you get a headache and the sniffles, what have you, the case is even stronger than ever to follow what they recommended over a year ago in the Great Barrington Declaration, which is people that are vulnerable should be protected, whatever that means. And the rest, they should allow this thing to run through society. If you get a sniffle and it's going to kill COVID forever, it seems like a decent trade-off. And you do have to wonder, why are they trying to prevent COVID from burning out? What are they thinking? Maybe they're afraid of losing control.
That's right.
Through fear.
There was an article today dealing with whether or not patients should be able to take ivermectin. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it before. I've talked about it as a physician already during this period of time, even calling in, even though I've kept up with all of my licenses and all that, and prescribed medicine, mm-hmm. To a certain degree, that I couldn't get that prescription filled, ivermectin. Uh-huh. And but it's still legal. It has a track record. And the FDA has given approval. They claim they haven't given full approval for this particular virus because it's recent and they haven't really taken the time to study this. But there was a case up in Illinois, and there was an individual, and I think he might have been a visitor or a recent immigrant or whatever, but he got very, very sick. And the family knew a little bit about ivermectin, and they wanted him to get this. But the gentleman was very elderly and very sick, and the family argued with the doctor, but there was no agreement. The hospital knew what the rules were, and they would not even really consider it. And finally, the patient's family went to a judge, and this is sort of sad that you have to go to a judge to get permission to do what you should have the right to do anyway, as long as the family and the doctor agree. That means the doctor-patient relationship is just being undermined, and that the interference is either bureaucrats, it's the bureaucrats against, finding a judge that might help you out. But anyway, the judge said he gets to take the medicine. Now you might say, well, you could just deal with this with rights. He's restored it and moved it in a direction where the patient got what the family wanted. But the best part of this particular story, and it's only one case, this patient got better and improved dramatically. And there's been stories of people who really believe in ivermectin that, that's not, it might help a little bit if you give it real early, then you don't know what would have happened anyway. But most people don't think that you should even try it much in here. But this to me doesn't give you the final answer of how much you can give and how often or how long you can wait. But what it does, it invites people to think if they want to be honest with themselves, they need to do a lot more research on how you can prescribe this and give it even in later stages. Maybe we're underusing it rather than this idea we're overusing it. But do you think there's any chance that the pharmaceutical companies could be involved in this decision making?
Yeah.
They say just take more drugs and more vaccine, and yet I think this gentleman had already had his vaccination.
Yeah. Well, the point of this segment is that we're not telling people to take ivermectin because we don't know if it works. We have no idea, and unfortunately, the people in charge refuse to study it, so it's unknown. But in this particular case, it's interesting because he's an elderly gentleman, 71 years old, from Hong Kong. He came over to the U.S. to visit his granddaughter on her first birthday. He became very ill with COVID-19, close to death, the family says. He was actually on a ventilator, which is a pretty bad sign. And his family went to court to get permission to use this. Now, usually it seems like if you're on the verge of death, they'd be allowing you to do something. They had to go to court. They gave it to him, and for whatever reason, we don't know because no one studies it, for whatever reason, he began to improve very quickly, and he survived and lived. But as you say, one of the real casualties of this episode in our history, this dark, dark episode, is the absolute, just utter destruction of the doctor-patient relationship.
Yes, and if a person is practicing good medicine, this is my personal philosophy, that the relationship to the patient, the social relationship, and how you treat the people and talk to the patients and how your staff talks to patients, because there's a lot of subjectivity in medicine. That's why I think you ended up with the term practice of medicine. So you do this and try to adapt to the events of going on, and empathy is a great tool. But in this seems to be so cold. What we're reading here, this is a cold way, so that adds to the problem. But I would think that it would encourage more people to look more into this. It is being used, but I think right now when it's being used, it's more for early stages, but it might be encouraging that maybe it should be used no matter how sick the patient is.
Yeah, people should be allowed to do what they want. Well, the next, our last story today is, we'll file this under weird. Let's put up a clip. Not the next one, actually just skip ahead too, because we already talked about the gentleman. Skip to that last JPEG if we can for our final segment. Sweden, get your vaccine passports in a chip in your hand or elsewhere under the skin. It's increasingly popular to insert an IOB chip into the body with different types of data. Now you can insert your COVID certificates in the chip. This is what they're doing in Sweden. A few months ago, well, when people were saying this last year, they were saying you're a weird conspiracy theorist, you're out of your minds. Now they're doing it. It's a little scary.
Yeah, and some people will say, well, Sweden, they've done pretty well. Maybe they're on track to doing something, and I think some people are actually doing it already voluntarily. I mean, but still, if that's what they decide to do, that's one thing. But it's also, a lot of this stuff is worldwide. This is what's really impressed me on how in the world have they been able to have this hysterical reaction be worldwide and engulf so many people. There's a lot of this type of thing goes on, but a lot of time it's narrow, one country or one region, and it lasts for a bit, and the hysteria fades away. But the hysteria right now, as we've often mentioned, the treatment has been very devastating to a lot of people. And the kids, we talk about, the mask on little kids. They never proved a thing that masks have ever prevented a disease for kids. And yet parents still feel very obligated, less so now. So things are moving in the right direction. But so even though one would say, well, this is really over the top. Who's going to do this and say that? Well, it'd be so much nicer. I won't have to dig out my credit cards.
Exactly.
They just look here, and they can tell, and they're going to take care of me anyway. Oh, well, yeah, we know what you need.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that got Alex Jones kicked off all the media, a couple of years ago. Turns out he's right. Well, I'm going to close, if you think we're done.
Sure.
I'm going to close with a little clip. Before I do that, though, I'm going to just remind our viewers of Dr. Paul's new book and how it is a gift to you for your support of the Ron Paul Institute, which puts on the Ron Paul Liberty Report. A gift of $50 will get you a copy of this book, and for $100, Dr. Paul will sign a copy. We are moving into our last week of this offer. We've had huge demand. Poor Dr. Paul, his hands are cramped up from signing all these books, but we can't go on forever. Plus, we are definitely going to do our best to get everyone's to them before Christmas. So we're heading into the last week. Don't wait. We want to make sure we get it to you. I will include instructions on how you can make your donation in the description of the show when we're done. But finally, Dr. Paul, you just have to watch this video. This is Joe Biden. He's going in to sign a bill into law, and it's just all about the theater. He put on his mask for 2 seconds, then he takes it off to turn to people and talk. So sick of the theater. Now let's watch this. This is insane. It's just hilariously insane.
How are you doing, man? Good to see you. Okay, I'm going to tell you all, I only have one pen. So you're all, no, you're all going to get a pen, but I only got one with me today. I couldn't figure out how to pick 50 of them up here, but thank you. All right. Congratulations. All right. Here we go.
Okay, so when he's talking to the people close around him, he has it off. When he leans over the bill to sign it, he puts it back on. I guess he doesn't want to give that folder COVID or something. I think somebody is kind of missing the point on this.
You know, we see a fair number of clips now, with the president, and it's really well received by the Republicans because they gloat over it.
Yeah.
But I have to confess, I'm not a real good Republican because I have trouble gloating.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's pathetic, and you can't possibly have sympathy when you're in politics for the opposition to being doing harm to himself.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't like the gloating, but it still has to be pointed out. But some of them, that's all they do.
Yeah.
And I think the message is stronger when people figure this out. But that's just my personal opinion, that the sad part, and there are so many clips, some of these clips, even in the campaign were so bad. But it's also the reason, if you want to find out what the people are thinking, there's a lot of polling that tells you that he is slipping. But where the real slippage is how we pick and choose our presidents. When you think about what was going on with all the lying, with the Russia gate going on, and this happening, and the people covering this up. I mean, there's some real problems there. But the process that we have, they say you don't have any other choices because they're all worse than what we do. No, I don't think that's the case. The problem really is there's too much government, and we have too many bureaucrats in there, too much money involved, and yes, we have imperfect people. If you could shrink the size of the government a bit, and I'll tell you what percentage I'd like it shrunk, and if you could do that, it would minimize and reduce the amount of tragic circumstances that come, whether it's in medicine, the monetary system, spending, economics, warmongering, and all these things. It would be a real blessing in having individuals who are designed and representing us for the purpose of protecting our liberties. But I would think that the goal has to be to have no less removal of about 80% of our government. 20% of what we have now, I really sincerely believe the country would do okay. Just think if you'd had a non-interventionist foreign policy. You mean that we wouldn't have had anybody killed on the American side or the foreigners that we bombed since World War II? Yeah, that would be it. How many billions? No, how many trillions of dollars would we have saved? So it goes on and on. And what about the cities that are blowing up now and they're burning it down, the people being rewarded? So the result is, well, let's fire all the police. So we don't need them. And if you arrest somebody, you put them in prison and say, oh, that's not nice to them. They killed somebody and they threatened to do this and they did all this damage. I think we should let them go and give them another chance. I mean, that is nonsense. We don't need to be spending money doing that. So I would say get rid of 80% of the government. And you say, well, where in the thunder did you get those ideas? Well, the Constitution sort of suggests that thing. And if everybody followed the Constitution, and everybody in Congress, do you know that everybody I met in Congress, I saw them pick up their hand and raise it up and swear an oath to keep the Constitution. So I guess I should relax and just figure, well, they've taken the oath and they will obey it. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, I'll tell you that. But I think we should have goals, and that's why we had the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, with a sincere belief that if we had a lot less government, we would have a lot better chances of gaining peace and prosperity. Those are our goals. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.